What's up everybody, this is the 2023 Kia EV6 GT. So about the GT version of the EV6, well, it's kind of understated honestly for the amount of performance you have. You have a 3.2 second 0 to 60. I mean, that'll keep up with most supercars out there. So in that area, it's a little understated, but I mean, as far as the EV6 in general goes, it's a very bold design, very out of the ordinary, and just kind of defies convention in a lot of ways. You have this short stubby hood. It has a lot of curvature to it and looks really cool, but it's just a very kind of flat front end there, the way they kind of designed it. It's just very, very short for the front end compared to the rest of the vehicle, which is, you know, very long and flowing. It's kind of funny having this stubby front end. But anyway, it looks really cool. And here on the GT version, you do have the more aggressive bumpers here in the front and in the back, and those headlights and all that there. It's definitely a very different take from the Ioniq 5 that this shares a platform with. That's more like retro futuristic in a way. This is, you know, just a little more of just being like a modern, just cool looking design in general. But other things coming down to the sides here, I think the sides are some of the most interesting parts of this vehicle. So you have, first off, 21-inch wheels here on the GT version. You have the lime green brake calipers behind it there that really jump out at you. And other interesting touches though is like the side mirrors. I usually don't talk about side mirrors in my reviews, but I mean, look at how they have this interesting shape to them. I guess that's for aerodynamics, but just something out of the ordinary I've never seen before on a side mirror. I really like the roof there and the way that that's sculpted with the different colors and how it flows into the rear spoiler there. You also have the flush door handles, which are a really cool touch. And you also have this body line here that sweeps up from the bottom and flows straight into those taillights, which are very cool, very three-dimensional, and just looks so interesting and just out of the ordinary once again compared to most other vehicles out there these days. And just a very cool look to the back end in general. I like that little like race-inspired reverse light there in the bottom part of the rear bumper there. And so overall, I just think this thing is really interesting. You could sit here probably for, you know, a good half an hour and just stare at all the different little features of this vehicle. It really is just a very cool thing to look at. The interior of the EV6 is really cool and very impressive. I mean, it feels very futuristic, very appropriate for this vehicle, and mostly appropriate for the price tag with a few caveats. So the first thing, actually one of the first caveats here, is these seats. So you get these unique seats here in the GT version, and they're just really awesome from a sporty standpoint. And if you're an enthusiast, you'll love them because they have really aggressive bolstering and feel really nice. But the odd thing is that they're not power seats. They have manual adjustment in a vehicle that's over $60,000. Just seems kind of strange. This thing is so high tech, and yet you still have manual seats. It's kind of bizarre. They're also not cooled seats here in these versions, because with this Alcantara, Kia doesn't like doing cooling with Alcantara for whatever reason. So you have these, you know, ultra suede kind of seats, and only heated for those, which is unfortunate because these kind of seats do get pretty hot here in the summer because they're not even perforated or anything. And so solid Alcantara on your back with no cooling isn't the most comfortable, so a little bit unfortunate there, but otherwise great seats. The steering wheel's really cool. I love the stitching, and you have the buttons here for the drive mode, the GT mode, and even paddle shifters, which are appreciated here. So that'll change the regen settings here, and just a really great 9.3 grip on it, and a really cool wheel. Although I will say the way that everything's positioned, you can't really see the gauge cluster in certain seating positions. I just wish the steering wheel would come down lower than it does. But anyway, moving on to the gauge cluster here. It's really nice. You have these double 12.3-inch displays here, and it's a curved display. It's all kind of like one piece, really cool looking. For the gauge portion here, it's the typical Kia digital gauge setup, and you know, this is something that you've seen in other stuff, and actually Hyundai has the same exact gauge setup in the Ioniq 5. So you know, all the same kind of looks here. You have the different themes depending on the drive mode you're in, and just basic adjustments there as far as what you can customize on the middle there. Not as customizable as I'd like to see, honestly, but still attractive and nice looking gauges, and nice that you have a nice large gauge cluster, because stuff like the Mach-E GT has a tiny little display. So really nice to have a full set of gauges here. Coming over to the middle here though, you have another one of these, again, 12.3-inch displays. It's touchscreen and works really great. It's like any other Hyundai Kia product over the past several years here. Works really well. The big downfall of these screens is there's no wireless Apple CarPlay or wireless Android Auto. It's only wired. Not a huge deal, aside from the fact that the only USB jack, there's USB jacks littered all over this vehicle, but the only one that actually works with CarPlay is this one way down in the footwell, essentially. It's almost on the floor, and so that's where USB jack is at, and you gotta either, I guess, have the cable running down to this lower bin, which makes it a pain to get to your phone, or you can have it up here, but there's a wireless charging pad here, which seems a little redundant considering, you know, you have to always plug it in anyway for smartphone integration. But if you're someone who doesn't use Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, not a big deal, or if you use it on a rare occasion, you know, at least it has it. But you know, just wish that it was a little bit better integrated and they use one of the other USB jacks, you know, to do that or something. But anyway, other things with this screen, navigation and stuff is all nice and easy to use, very easy to tune, radio stations and go through everything there. And even the Bluetooth audio streaming is really good with the way Hyundai and Kia always have like the next up thing here of your songs coming up. A little bit more integration than the average Bluetooth audio streaming. And then coming down, one other interesting thing here is, this is something we're starting to see in other Kia models as well, but it kind of started here with the EV6, where you have this dual mode little bar down here. And so you can have it either control your radio settings and, just media stuff, or you can hit the climate button there, and then that will cause it to be the climate controls as well. So it can be a little disorienting if you're used to one or the other in that area. You do have screen controls for all that stuff as well if you'd like. But I honestly, this is I think the third or fourth vehicle I've had now that has this setup. The Sportage and the Nero also had it, and it's not a big deal. I don't really mind it, and I think it's a nice way to kind of reduce the amount of buttons here, and very creative I think on Kia's part. So I really like that. And other things though that I'm not super impressed by, like this shifter is plastic, and it feels really plasticky. It's kind of a cool design, but just wish they would have invested a few bucks in some nicer materials here. There are some interesting materials with like this dash here. You have this like perforated kind of vinyl with these stripes here. It's kind of cool, and even some texture here to the plastic kind of makes it look like metal, even though it's definitely plastic. So there's some cheap parts here in this vehicle. I think this is one of these vehicles, even though it's expensive, you're paying for the performance. And like a muscle car or something, you often don't get the nicest interior in those. It's all about the performance. Go into this with the same mindset, you won't be disappointed. But otherwise, if you're going into this expecting a $60,000 luxury vehicle that just so happens to be as fast as a supercar, you're going to be disappointed. The materials, there's lots of plastic in here. Again, the manual seats, there's a lot of things in here that kind of lower it from a prestige standpoint. One thing that is very prestigious, though, about this interior is the Meridian stereo this has. It has a surround sound Meridian, and it's a nice upgrade over some of the other, Kia stereos. Sometimes they'll use, Bose or, some other company, but it's the first time you've seen Meridian here in a Kia, and I'm excited to try that out here this week. But otherwise, lots of storage space here in the EV6. They did a great job with that, with large pockets in the doors. Again, this huge middle area here, which is great, and a nice deep center cubby as well. And so great, you have all those different little cubbies. Also, as far as space goes, in the back seat, you have tons of space. I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself. I have, I don't know, probably about a foot of legroom to spare. I mean, it is a ton of space back there. It's really, really impressive, and lots of headroom as well. But just, I mean, you can also have that seat reclined backwards and give yourself even more space if you like. But it's just a really comfortable seat. They also have their own air vents. There's pockets in those doors, fold-down bottle holder, there as well. Trunk space is also pretty spacious. It's not the most spacious. You can have a lower setting if you don't need the flat load floor with the seats folded down. You can't have it and give yourself a couple extra inches of depth there, but it's still not a ton of space, and you can't really open up any of those pockets beneath the floor either. So that's all you really have to work with there. It's decent. I'd say it's, a little bit bigger than like a Mach-E, but the thing is here with this, you only have a tiny little frunk versus the Mach-E actually having a usable frunk. You can fit some suitcases in. This thing, you can fit your charging cable in there, and that's about it. But otherwise, good amount of space. Overall, though, I'm really impressed with this interior. Just wish they, improved some of the materials, but, again, for the performance, I think this is totally acceptable. But let's turn it on and go for a drive. The EV6 GT just has a regular Kia key, but it's the newer Kia key, which is really cool. I love how you have the buttons here on the side of it. They started that with the Stinger and continued on here with all these other Kias. But a really nice key, has a nice way to it. Also has this smart park kind of thing. You can have to go forwards and backwards in the space if you want. But of course it is keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the power button, and it turns right on. All right, so setting off here in the EV6 GT. So the first thing you notice, well, again, the first thing I noticed, like I mentioned in the interior segment, is just this seating position being a little weird. I haven't found a comfortable seating position yet where I can see the gauges clearly. The steering wheel is just up too high. I wish everything was pushed down just a little bit in front of me, because I even have this seat up a little bit higher, and it's still just a little awkward. But aside from that, visibility is really good here in the EV6, regardless of where you're sitting, just because you have a nice large windshield, good, large side windows. The A-pillars aren't too thick, even with that speaker there at the base of it. And view out of the back is, pretty typical crossover. So really easy to drive as far as all that goes. Another thing you notice immediately in this is the very delicate pedal pressure that you need to give this thing. So both for the gas pedal, it's very sensitive, and you can really take off very quickly. Even in normal mode here, it just feels like it just wants to take off on you. So you have to be delicate with your throttle inputs. And also the brakes. You have these big 15-inch brake rotors, 4-piston calipers up front. They're even 14.2 inches in the rear. I mean, big, beefy brakes all around. And it means that at low speeds, they're a little tricky to be totally smooth with. It's just something you have to get used to. Just be very delicate with your inputs in this vehicle. Another thing though that's really cool is, again, the regen paddle. So there's 4 different levels here. I'm in 0, which is like totally coasting with no resistance, and then you can crank it up. Level 1 is kind of like what a manual transmission vehicle would be like, you know, whenever you let off the gas. And then you have 2 and 3, which are really aggressive with slowing you down. And the 4th is basically, they call it I-pedal, and it's basically like a 1-pedal mode where it will come to a complete stop. Here we're coming up to a stop sign, and yeah, it comes all the way to a stop all on its own. So if you like the 1-pedal thing, you know, you have that option here with this, but it's great to give you all the you know, adjustments here, so you can have it, you know, as much or as little as you want. You can also play with it going down hills, things like that, to maximize your regen, which is how I kind of like playing with it, is just going down a steep hill, you know, ramp it up and then back it off whenever you're you know, on more level ground. But anyway, other things here. Well, it's really quiet, of course, being an electric vehicle. And that sound you're hearing, I believe, is natural sound. There are this active sound design thing that you can play around with, and there's like 3 different sounds, and you can have 3 different volumes for how loud you want those sounds to be. I'll play with those a little bit later on, but basically they don't really correlate to your speed very well, so it's just kind of like playing a random ambient sound in the background that kind of changes, but not really. It's a little odd, but again, I'll demonstrate that here in a few minutes. But really smooth, comfortable ride, though. You do have adaptive dampers here in the GT version. In normal mode here, we're in the most comfortable damper settings, and it is really smooth. I mean, it really glides over the bumps, and I'd say actually feels a little smoother than like the Mach-E, for example, even like a regular Mach-E. It's really impressive, and especially compared to the GT, this is a much smoother ride than that, I will say. But we got a back road here we're going to turn down, and I'm going to put it into the GT driving mode. And there is actually a My Drive mode, so we'll try that out here and see how that does later on. But as far as the GT mode here, that unlocks the full 576 horsepower. And so here we go. Whoa! Woo, man! And that's all the accelerating I can do if I want to respect the speed limits. Wow, but yeah, it even turns traction control off here whenever you're in this GT mode. Man, it really takes off. Wow. So yes, feels every bit as fast as that 3.2 seconds there to 60, and honestly even faster than a lot of those supercars that have that bragging right, because with this, obviously you have the perfect launch from the get-go, and it's just instant power, 100% of that power right off the bat. By the way, it'll also do, I think, like an 11.6 second quarter mile time at 119 miles per hour. I mean, it is insanely fast. And yeah, so 576 horsepower, it's like 560 pound-feet of torque, so it's really, really quick. Now, that is like less torque, for example, than a Mach-E GT Performance, but you have more horsepower, a lot more horsepower, almost 100 more than that Mach-E GT. And I would say, you know, I had one of those last summer for a week. This certainly feels faster. Yeah, and it hits you harder too whenever you floor it. It is aggressive with the way this thing accelerates. I mean, it is wild stuff. And also, if you want to get even wilder, there's a drift mode, which I would recommend being on closed roads for. But that will allow you to completely get rid of all the, you know, stability control and stuff, and allow it to have a more rear bias setup for these dual motors, and allow you to do drifts. So if you aren't in the GT mode, you do get a downgrade in horsepower. So even in sport mode or the normal mode, you only get 460 of that horsepower, although you still get the full like 550 odd pound-feet of torque regardless of what mode you're in. But it's still, I mean, either way, no matter how you look at it, you're still a huge improvement over what you get with, like, for example, a regular EV6, which does like 320 horsepower, I think 446 pound-feet of torque in those. So I mean, this is a good bit faster. Another quick low acceleration. All right, that time it actually spun the tires on the gravel. Anyway, we're coming to some corners here I always take. Let's see how the EV6 GT handles. All right, so we do got a little bit of gravel it's picking up here, but it's handling it really well still. The funny thing is, though, you are sitting up kind of high. You know, this kind of does have like a crossover kind of seating position almost, and so it's just crazy, though. You do have really good handling here. Oh yeah, it wanted to kick the back end out there on me, especially here in the GT mode with the nannies turned off there. It is a little more tail happy, and it's so funny because I think Kia and Hyundai, you know, made the right choice of making the more powerful motor be the rear motor. The Mach-E GT, you know, is a Mustang, but yet it has a stronger motor in the front and feels more like a hot hatch with that thing having torque steer and stuff. This feels more like a Mustang than the Mach-E GT does to me, because this thing actually wants to kick the back end out, and is just, man, it's a wild ride. And I love the balance of it. It's also impressive that this thing only has 255 wide tires on it. Now they're Eagle F1, like an EV SUV version of that Eagle F1 summer tire. So they are, very, sporty compound, but still, really good amount of grip, and just feels really good. You also have quicker steering here in the GT version of the EV6, so that's also appreciated. I am noticing, I mean, it is nice quick steering, and that certainly helps this to feel a lot more aggressive and just ready and eager and willing to just, play around with you and just have a blast. And whew, man, that was a fun one. And yes, there is a My Drive mode, and so thankfully that will allow you to adjust the motors, the steering, the suspension, the ELSD, and the ESC in order to make all those, exactly how you want them to feel. And it's nice that it does that, but you still, I believe, are locked out of that top horsepower number unless you are in the GT version. So if you want the craziest thing all the time, you're gonna have to just hit that, but at least it's a nice steering wheel mounted button, nice and quick and easy to access. Just one tap and you're there. But really nice, they do give you that other mode, so if you do wanna have things dialed in for, your own preferences, if you want to have a stiffer suspension or a softer suspension with the other stuff, you can totally do that. And so it's great that you give that customization too. And this time I'm going to do an acceleration from a complete stop. Here we go. GT mode. Wow, that's impressive. Honestly though, that's interesting. I think it actually feels a little less punchy whenever you're going from a stop, so I'm guessing they're limiting power there a little bit just to preserve the motors or whatever. But whenever you're rolling, I think that actually 5 to 60 mile per hour is even the more aggressive feeling setup. I'm sure there's probably a launch mode or something, but as far as just regularly punching it from zero, yeah, I think it actually feels faster whenever you're up and rolling, which is impressive for an EV to do, honestly. But man, oh man, this thing, it's just so addicting. I just want to do it everywhere, but then I can't. I got to do it for like half a second, and then I got to pull my foot off if I want to actually keep my license. So, but anyway, it's a ton of fun. By the way, if you can keep your foot in it, these things have a top speed of 161 miles per hour. So, I mean, pretty impressive for an EV as well, especially one that just has a 1-speed transmission. We don't have a 2-speed thing like you get in a Porsche Taycan or anything like that, and yet it still has a pretty high top speed, so that's cool as well. And but yeah, these brakes really feel nice and meaty, and you want nice meaty brakes when you're talking about this kind of performance and power, because it is reassuring to have, because you're going to want to be able to slow down nice and fast, especially considering how heavy this thing is. So these weigh 4,772 pounds or so, which by EV standards isn't insane, but it's certainly pretty weighty still, and you do feel some of that weight here, whenever you're throwing around corners, but especially with the dampers being so nice and firm and well controlled, it really masks the weight well, so it doesn't feel like it's this enormous heavy thing whenever you're carving up a back road in it. One other really great thing about this is that it has an ELSD, so it really does a good job of putting the power down. Obviously it's all-wheel drive with dual motors, but it really does a good job of picking out where that power should go. And man, but this thing, it's impressive. It's tossing my camera gear all around back there. It's yeah, you can really carve up a back road pretty intensely in this thing. It's crazy, and also it doesn't feel like you're going insanely fast unless you're actively flooring it, but whenever you're just carrying speed through corners, it really does a good job of masking that speed, and just it really shows you how effortlessly it can do that. It really is so good. Oh man, this thing is so much fun. This would be like a really fun vehicle to take even on a track day, I think, because it's just like one of these vehicles that while it lasts with the battery, it'll be hilarious fun, I'm sure, on a track. But corner exit there, I just want to get on the gas a little earlier, see if I can provoke a little bit of a slide, and it's pretty well controlled, so it's not going to step out on you quite as wildly as something that's purely rear-wheel drive or anything like that, but really does a good job. And again, if you have any inclination to do any kind of drifting, you can put it in that drift mode and have at it. So anyway, yeah, very impressive from a dynamic standpoint here, and yeah, I have no complaints on the performance of the EV6 GT. And I'm going to try out this active sound design here, and I'll demonstrate all these different sounds for you. So I'm going to put on the largest change so you can hear it the most, and I'm going to go through all the different modes. So there's stylish is one of them. So that's how it sounds on acceleration and braking here. Pretty subtle, not too bad there. And then there's the dynamic mode we'll try. It almost sounds like it's some type of like turbo 4-cylinder, just electrified. But see, like, it kind of correlates to my speed, but not as directly as I want it to. It doesn't feel like it's trying to be realistic. It's just like this suggestion of sound almost. Anyway, last one, Cyber here. That kind of feels more like a typical electric vehicle, I suppose. And honestly, that's a nice sound as well. So, you know, it's great to give you the options, but again, if you don't want any of them, you just turn it off, and then you don't have any of them, and silence. So again, all about giving you options. I love that Hyundai and Kia are thinking outside of the box and just offering these things. If people hate them, fine, you turn them off. But it doesn't cost them a bunch of money to, you know, incorporate some extra sounds that are playing through the speakers. So why not do it? I love that, and I wish that was something that they offered. For example, I mean, the Mach-E kind of has like one thing with the unbridled mode, but that's about it. Otherwise, there's really nothing to customize there. So I like that they're offering that kind of stuff here. Anyway, though, the one other big important thing about the EV6 being a electric vehicle is the battery. So it has a 77.4 kilowatt hour battery, and it's on the 800 volt architecture of the EGMP platform that Hyundai and Kia and Genesis are using, and they really set this whole platform up very well from the get-go. So it has some of the best charging in the industry. I mean, it does a 10% to 80% charge in just 18 minutes, and so I mean, it is insanely quick with the charging, which you're going to need because this thing only has a range of 206 miles here for the GT version. If you go for a regular EV6, you know, it's anywhere between like, I think, 270 to like 320 miles of range or something. This is way less, obviously, because of the performance and the extra drain from those, you know, motors. But you know, it's going to come down to your kind of driving as well. And if you're someone who is going to take it easy, you know, you could obviously get much better range. If you wanted to, you know, try and find some smaller wheels or something, you could probably get some better range there, you know, things like that. It's not the end of the world. And the nice thing is you do have a heat pump here in the EV6, so that gives you a little bit better range in the wintertime if you do see cold temperatures compared to something like a Mach-E GT, which doesn't have that. So there are certainly some advantages here. And again, since it charges so fast, I would argue that yes, it's not great for road trips, but it's going to charge so fast, you know, you stop every, you know, 200 miles or so, plug it in for 15 minutes and you're set. You know, it's really, I think, pretty minimal, you know, as far as, you know, yes, the range number isn't super huge, and for some people that's going to be a source of anxiety, but I really don't think it needs to be, especially when you have charge times this fast. But anyway, we're now out on the highway here, so I'm going to put on the adaptive cruise control system. And it does also have the highway drive assist function here, so I can have it do the lane keeping assist for me here. And it is a hands-on system still, but it will, you know, give you the steering assist and help you out. And so I've tested this system in various other Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis products, probably a dozen different vehicles that all have this technology so far, and they're always fairly underwhelming. It's not always a super reliable system. Some are better than others. It's just going to come down to, you know, the kind of roads that you're on, the conditions. You know, that's really going to be it. But, you know, in Western Pennsylvania here, we have some curves on our highways, and it's doing a pretty decent job here. But there's been other times where they've lost track of the road lines pretty easily and been a little bit odd with the steering assist. So, you know, it's going to come down to, again, it's just always going to be a different experience with these. Unfortunately, it isn't consistent, at least so far. And so just be aware of that. I think, you know, Ford has the edge with the Blue Cruise technology that has, where it's truly hands-free. That is going to be the way to go if you're going to do lots of highway miles. I think, you know, having the truly hands-free thing and having your hands resting on your lap is a lot more relaxing than having it trying to do the steering for you, but you still have to have your hands on the wheel the whole time. You know, it's just not as good of a feeling as the Blue Cruise, which I used extensively on a road trip last year in our Mach-E. Certainly, I think the better system. But, you know, especially if you're buying one of these GT versions, you're probably not super concerned about that, but it is nice that it still does do the assistance for you. And otherwise, though, out here on the highway, so adaptive cruise, the normal adaptive cruise part works really well. It slowed down nicely for that car that cut in front of me, and it's just, you know, a nice thing as far as, you know, the ride quality is super smooth here in normal mode again. Pretty nice and quiet. Not luxury car quiet, I don't think, but still very nice for sure. And yeah, overall just a really nice thing to cruise around in here. But anyway, thanks to Kia, I'm going to have the EV6 GT for an entire week, so I'm going to drive around all over the place, and I'll come back and give you guys my final real-world efficiency and also my thoughts on the pricing, how it compares to its competitors as far as value standpoint goes, and anything else I notice here during my week of driving. Alright, so I've been driving the EV6 GT for a week now, and man, this thing is so much fun and so impressive. And even in normal mode here, you know, even not even bothering pressing one button to go into GT mode, it still is so much power and that it's so much fun to just, you know, hit the gas in this thing. And also it's fun because you can really hear those electric motors, and the more that I've been driving around in silence here this week, I've really enjoyed just hearing those real motor sounds that don't even need that augmentation, because just the real stuff is really cool sounding in my opinion still. Just and man, this thing, so the roads are wet right now, so you might hear a little extra road noise, but this thing really wants to step out badly. It is so fun how This thing is wild. It is so much more fun than the Mach-E GT in my opinion, and is just a handful, honestly, in the right conditions. And so anyway, the other things that I noticed here during my week, first off, the ride on these 21-inch wheels, I'm really impressed with just how smooth this is. That combined with that adaptive suspension, all week, just using this as a baby hauler and driving the family around, it still was super comfortable. So there's really no compromise. Yes, this is the sporty GT version, but it's not like it's some super uncomfortable supercar kind of ride or anything. It still rides really comfortably, and it would be a great daily driver even if you don't plan to drive it like a crazy person every day. And then another thing though that I didn't love was this stereo. So this has this Meridian stereo, and I was like really prepared to be impressed by it because I've heard really great things about Meridian stereos. This one was really sharp and didn't sound like, it was actually like almost hurt my ears whenever I go up to higher volumes with just how sharp it was. I even turned down the treble all the way. Now I'm no audio expert, so I don't know what the deal is. Maybe I had it set up wrong or something, but everything else is in the default normal settings that you shouldn't have to mess with, honestly, and it still just was way too sharp for all the audio that I listened to, both through Bluetooth audio streaming, radio, whatever. It all just was not very good sounding. Obviously you can turn it down at lower volumes, it was more tolerable, but I was just kind of surprised this stereo does not sound very good in my opinion. So not sure why. I don't know if it's just this car or what, but that's just my honest take on it. It is not a very appealing stereo. I think the Mach-E stereo sounds much better, and as does everything else that I've tested this kind of competes with. But the last two things here to mention are my efficiency and the pricing and how it compares to the competition. So first off, as far as efficiency goes, it hasn't been great. So this vehicle was delivered to me with like a 95% charge or whatever. I'm down to 46% now, so I haven't driven a ton, only 86 miles, but my average miles per kilowatt hour has been 2.4 miles per kilowatt hour. So I will put the math on the screen there as far as what that would mean for this battery size, but it's not great range. I mean, you already start with the low 206 miles of rated range, and most of the week it was pretty warm here too. Now it's a little cooler, so that's going to hurt the battery even more, but it's just not great. But like I mentioned, at least it has a super fast recharge times, and so that certainly helps soften the blow if you're on a road trip in one of these, because at least you'll be back on the road really quickly. But can't say that that's great, but obviously it's just the compromise you make having the extra power. Unless you want to have something with a huge battery, you're not going to get great range out of it. And these things that are sucking down electricity this fast. But then the last thing to mention though is the pricing and how it compares to its competition, and in that regard it is very impressive. So they've really nailed the pricing on this, and honestly I mean, it's pretty compelling even as far as regular EV6s go. It's only about a $4,000 upcharge over a top of the line fully loaded all-wheel drive GT line version of the EV6. So you're not really paying much of a premium for all this extra performance, so it's really a value as far as that goes. And also compared to like the Mach-E GT, those comparably equipped for like a performance package one, which will get you to similar kind of performance as this, those are still going to run you like 72 grand. This one as tested is right at $63,000, and there's no option packages on this. They all come fully loaded, which makes it nice and easy both for hunting one down and just as far as comparison purposes go. But anyway, so I mean, this undercuts the Mach-E GT by like 9 grand, and the Mach-E GT may be eligible for a tax credit potentially. Those rules are always changing, so you have to look into that for yourself. But that's really the only edge, but that still is not going to close the gap between this and that, being 9 grand difference. And like I said, this is more fun. This honestly feels more like a Mustang in my opinion, because of the rear-wheel drive antics compared to the Mach-E GT being front bias with its power delivery. So I would handily take this over that, even if they were the same price. But then to factor in 9 grand cheaper for this, easily take this over a Mach-E GT in my opinion. The only other competitor that's really compelling though is the Tesla Model Y Performance, because they recently cut the price on all those pretty aggressively, and the Model Y Performance is about $57,000 if you don't get the enhanced autopilot. If you do get that, if you're someone who wants to have the auto lane changes and some of the other things that the enhanced autopilot does, that will put you at like a nearly identical 63 grand for this versus that. Now that will give you, I think, definitely better range for sure, and also very comparable performance as far as straight line performance goes, but that has less handling hardware, so it's going to come down to whether you're focused on, just blowing people away at red lights and impressing your buddies, or if it's truly about a good driving, handling vehicle. Now, in all fairness, I have not driven the Model Y Performance or any Model Y for that matter, so I cannot personally comment on how this feels compared to that. But what I know is that this has the drift mode, which you don't get in the Tesla. This has, the ELSD. It has all these other things to make this a sportier experience, I think. think, and just seems a little more performance focused and a little more well-rounded versus the slightly more hot rod approach of the Model Y, just having, you know, a ton of power and you know, a few other upgrades for sure, but you know, nothing quite as comprehensive, I think, as this. But, you know, again, this is going to come down to personal preference and stuff. I also would take this over that, even if this was more expensive, because you have actual gauges, you have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. You know, those things are missing in a Model Y. And for me, and I think a lot of other people, having smartphone integration is very important, and this could put this over that just, you know, in general. But, you know, I think as far as pricing goes, that potentially could undercut. And the Model Y also does offer potentially a tax credit as well, again, depending on how the rules are changing constantly. But it seems like that is possibly still eligible for a tax credit. This is not, once again. So Model Y comes in cheaper potentially if you don't need all the driver assist stuff, and then with the tax credit could get even cheaper still and really come in to be a solid value, well undercutting this. So that is really the biggest, you know, problem I think for the EV6 GT is the Model Y performance. But aside from that, I think this is really, you know, top-notch performance, and you know, we will just have to wait and see. The only thing I will say is if you are considering one of these, there's also the Hyundai Ioniq 5N. If you like that styling, the N version is coming, and it sounds like that will even do more power than this, from a very similar setup, same platform, and you know, very similar in a lot of ways most likely, but it seems like they're going to amp up the drama and the antics and make it a little more exciting. This will probably be the more sleeper of the two, and you know, be the one that flies under the radar for sure with the styling of this, and also just being a little bit tamer, even though this is still very wild. Again, 3.2 seconds 0 to 60, but a little tamer than what I think they're going to really be playing up with the Ioniq 5, and that's going to have like manual shifting modes and all kinds of other things. So you know, if you are someone that's kind of on the fence about this, maybe wait and see how that plays out with the Ioniq 5N. But aside from that, I think this is a really solid buy for sure. Again, as long as the lower range doesn't bother you. Yeah, I just think this thing is awesome, and it'd be an awesome daily driver for sure. But anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the EV6 GT. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks also to Kia for providing me with this vehicle to review for you guys today. Please also leave a like, comment, and subscribe to keep these videos coming, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.